Well, hello there. Welcome back. Alex Phillips here with you until 1 o'clock, 24 minutes left. And I'm not looking forward to the end of the show, but part of me does want to sink into my sofa, close my eyes and imagine I'm still on holiday. Right, now let's talk about the fact that 400,000 migrants have moved to the UK since 2021 without criminal records checks. You would think, actually, that part of the coming and working in this country, particularly if it's in the care sector and so on and so forth, you would want to find out if these foreign nationals coming over to the country had anything dark in their past. Well, apparently, all you have to do is sort of sign on the bit of paper, do you have a criminal record, and go, no. I mean, if you had a criminal record, you're hiding, oh yeah, as it happens, I once murdered someone. Can I still come? It seems to me utterly ridiculous. Now, of course, you can't blame the Labour government when this has been going on since 2021. But you would hope they might do something about this. Let's speak to Danny Shaw, Home Affairs commentator and former advisor to Yvette Cooper. Danny, great to have you back on the programme. How on earth, when you've got workers' visas being given out, and you'd imagine the barriers for entry are fairly substantial, that, you know, you've got to sort of demonstrate how much money you've got in the bank account, what job you've got, whether you can support your family, so on and so forth. But there's no check of a criminal record. It's madness.
It seems to me, Alex, to be an extraordinary loophole. And, you know, you're quite right. You know, we're talking here about people who come to the UK legally. They're given visas to work, for example. And they have to prove that they are going to earn a certain amount of money. There are quite rigorous checks on the salaries that they're going to earn and so on, and whether they can support their family. But only if they work in the health or education sector would they have to do some kind of enhanced criminal record check, it seems, from these figures. So this is data from the Centre for Migration Control. It said that between 2021 and March 2024, there were 504,000 visas handed out. 237,000, there were no checks on criminal records at all, plus an estimated 154,000 relatives who would have been entitled to come. So that gives you a total of around about 400,000 without any checks. I absolutely think that this is a bit of a sort of scandal, really, that's here, that has been allowed to happen, and that there should be a way of conducting checks on these people in their home countries. Now, it may well be that in some of the countries people are coming from, the sort of criminal record database, the records are not as good as they are in this country. I'm not saying they're perfect in the UK, but we do have a sort of coordinated system. It may well be that, you know, those records don't exist, but I think there should be more stringent checks, definitely.
Yeah, you think so? I can imagine that, you know, depending which country, you say, oh, can you provide this particular form? It might not exist, but it does. It is staggering, and especially when you look at the percentage of our prison population who are indeed foreign-born. So, yeah, one hopes that the Labour government will jump on this story and say, we've got to close this loophole. Let's talk about the concept of the Rwanda plan. I mean, it's going to be very difficult for Sir Keir Starmer to ride back on this and go, oh, we're going to bring the Rwanda plan back after calling it a gimmick. But it does seem to me he's softening to the idea of at least going over and looking over Maloney's shoulder and saying, how are you dealing with all of this with your migrant processing centre in Albania? And it turns out that, well, there's an EU leaders summit in Brussels today, the Big Four, if you will, are all meeting, and migration, no doubt, is going to be dominating that conversation. We've actually heard of Poland turning around saying nobody can claim asylum here anymore. Good old Donald Tusk, the new Prime Minister of Poland, who was once, of course, President of the European Council, who's pointed out that, well, look, Russia are busing people to our border and using this as an act of grey zone warfare. The rest of Europe seems to be getting very tough and is looking at the idea of using foreign hubs as processing centres at the exact moment that Keir Starmer said, we're going to bin that policy.
Well, look, you know, cards on the table, Alex. I was absolutely implacably opposed to the Rwanda scheme. I thought it was an astonishing waste of taxpayers' money. Around £700 million spent on that scheme over 2.5 years. And how many people went to Rwanda? 4 people volunteered to go. I thought it was an absolute disgrace of a scandal and a waste of money. But that's not to say that you can't have a system whereby visas, perhaps, and applications for asylum are processed abroad, and where people who have no right to be here and who have failed in their claim and who can't be deported to their home country, perhaps because it's not safe, can be removed to another third country that is safe. I don't have a problem with that, but I had a problem with the Rwanda scheme because it was very different. Everyone was going to come to the UK and then shipped over there and processed over there. And even if their claim was successful, they wouldn't be allowed back to the UK. That's very, very different. So I don't think there's anything wrong with offshore processing. And it's no surprise that Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission president, is looking at this and encouraging member states to think innovatively and to look at, I think, as she called it, return hubs outside the EU. That would, to me, to be a sensible policy if that country is safe and if it can be guaranteed that the people who are sent there will be looked after and treated with respect and fairly.
I've always wondered, actually, I mean, given the fact that we've just learned earlier today that as part of the package of giving the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, we've agreed to allow migrants or asylum seekers from Sri Lanka landing there to be taken all the way to the other side of continental Africa, to St Helena, one of the most remote islands in the world, which is another British overseas territory, and be dealt with and processed over in St Helena. And I thought to myself, if they can get people all the way from the Chagos Islands over to St Helena for processing, I mean, that seems to me, you know, quite remarkable. We have a lot of British...
Small numbers.
We have a lot of British Isles. I mean, surely there's something knocking about in the Shetlands or the Outer Hebrides we could use.
Well, possibly. I don't know that the numbers would quite work on islands like that. But look, you know, these are important details, but the principle of it, there's nothing wrong with the principle of it. You know, Yvette Cooper, when I was working for her, would point out, for example, that people were let into the UK from Ukraine. Their visas were basically processed abroad. They were allowed to come to the UK and stay in the UK without even setting foot here first. All the processing was done overseas, as it were, while they were overseas. So there's nothing wrong with processing claims overseas, and there's nothing wrong with returning people to safe countries if their claim has failed. And so we should be encouraging, you know, the government and certainly EU administrations as well to look at that. But the key thing is safe. Rwanda is not a democratic nation. I'm afraid it does have a poor human rights record, and there were some real concerns expressed by our own court, not European court, the UK Supreme Court, about that particular scheme that said it's not safe. And I think it's just worth people reflecting on that.
Yeah, I mean, like, as someone who's lived in East Africa, I think that the sort of view of Rwanda is quite distorted. I think it's a pretty pleasant country. But I want to drill down onto the idea of these safe routes, because I feel like that was what you were sort of suggesting about with, you know, Ukrainians processed over there. To me, the difference is this was a sort of very quick decision that was taken after Russia invaded Ukraine, knowing that all men between 18 and 60 had to stay behind and fight. This was about women and children being given sanctuary from another European nation, and also a nation where, by and large, the cultural mores are very similar to ours. And I think a lot of people are content with that. My problem is if you start sticking safe routes in countries such as Afghanistan or Sudan or neighbouring countries, you don't know who you're going to be getting from those countries. It's all very well saying, oh, you know, I don't like the RDF in Sudan. How do you know they're not the RDF? It goes the same with Taliban and Taliban sympathisers. So I'm not sure. And I also think that, you know, we're therefore depending as well on countries with dodgy regimes and being the people potentially helping us process people for asylum. I don't understand how the safe routes thing could work.
Well, look, we have had safe routes in the past. I mean, we've had a Syrian scheme, didn't we? We had an Afghanistan scheme to allow people to come to the UK. So those schemes and those routes have existed in the past. If they're administered properly, I agree with you, Alex. You know, there always is a danger that you know, people will trick the system, or, you know, undesirable people will be let into the UK. But look, we've just been talking about a report about 400,000 migrants who've come in without criminal record checks, and you know, the odds are that some of those will be people who really should not be in this country. So no system is fail-safe. But I think if you set up some more of these schemes alongside other law enforcement measures, I think you actually can begin to make some inroads in tackling the problem of illegal migration, people coming through small boats. It's not the only way to do it, but I think it is a potential answer to the problem. But you have to accept that in a world where there is mass movement, there's mass migration, that some people are going to come to the UK, and we will give sanctuary to some people in the UK. There has to be an acceptance and understanding of that. We can't just isolate ourselves from all the problems that are going on in the world.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that a lot of people would be quite mindful and positive about it, accepting genuine asylum seekers. I just feel that people are very sceptical about where the threshold is when it comes to our capacity and who these people might be. But, you know, that is a conversation for another day, because I've run out of time, Danny. It's been fantastic having you on the programme. Quickly, Migrant, I mean, this safe routes thing, great. Look, I'm going to be honest, when it comes to Ukraine, it's a country with a very similar cultural heritage to us. It's a Christian country.
Yeah.
It's a country where a lot of people there actually have a very good English. It's a country where you wouldn't necessarily worry if people coming in from Ukraine were going to be able to fully integrate, if they're going to be harmful to our society. It was women and children.
Yeah.
It was the vulnerable people in a war zone who you go, look, we can't leave those wretched souls there. And the Ukrainians came to seek shelter and want to go back. This isn't this idea they're going to come here and say, we're here forever, we now want to live in the UK for the rest of time. And good old Poland, who have now said nobody can claim asylum in this country, really took the brunt of that migratory flow. It's a different thing when it comes to countries in the Middle East. It's a different thing when it comes to countries in the Horn of Africa. And the minute you open the door to safe routes, every country, every developing world country with a slightly dodgy regime or doesn't have LGBTQ rights, which is pretty much 3/4 of the world, are going to say, great, this is it, I'm going to be able to come to Britain. And we just can't have everyone coming. It's ridiculous.
There's the issue of stable governments and corruption. So obviously if you're in Afghanistan, you're going to want to come to the UK, and corruption's going to be rife. So in terms of a safe route and your application, your criminal status and all of that being kind of thwarted and dodged and all the rest of it, that can easily happen. The second thing is you bring up, I give credit to Kemi Badenoch. Not all cultures are the same, right? And we've in society today, we've been restricted from just saying what is obviously in front of our eyes. We're just being kind of, muffled and maimed. We can't actually talk about it. We can't talk about it. It's obviously the case that if you're coming from Afghanistan and other countries of a similar nature, not all cultures are the same. Not all food is the same, by the way. Not all cars are the same. So it's not surprising that not all cultures are the same. And so we must take greater care when there are people coming from certain countries with certain cultures. There should be an analysis of values. There should be an analysis of crime rates, of certain practices and etiquettes and ideals. There should be an analysis. That should be part of the whole safe routes situation, where you start to realise and go, where are they coming from? What is the typical average person? How do they think? What is their treatment of women, children, and so on?
I read a remarkable story this morning just before hopping on the tube about an Egyptian surgeon in this country. And I always say that actually if you discriminate on who can come to a country based upon skills, by and large, when you've got the very educated class,
academic,
they're likely to share our... they're going to have a degree of exposure to Western culture. They're likely to be more westernised in their attitudes and opinions. Anyway, this Egyptian surgeon has been struck off by the GMC because he was a perennial harasser of women. And in defence, he said, oh, well, it's because of England's culture. It's because it's too open. Women are too open. And you think, blimmin' heck.
But that is a cultural mindset. We would blame the man, obviously. They would blame the woman.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
right?
Exactly. But this is...
You made me do this by what you're wearing.
We're talking about a highly educated man, if he's a surgeon, who's come over here working in the NHS, who sort of goes, yeah, women far too friendly over here, that's why I was harassing them.
Yeah, the whole etiquette is different to us, and we just need to own up and start talking openly and having free-flowing conversations about this, because it's affecting our immigration policy.
Yeah.
And therefore
talk
our society.
Openly, free-flowing conversation, you come to the right place, because that's what we do, and that's what we're going to do more of after the break.